All right, we're calling the meeting to order at 5:02 for S&A Committee today. I see Brandon Thomas, Evelyn Roan, Jessica and Brady's, and Sean and Joey and myself, Alice Williams, which is full quorum. Today we, shoot, I don't have the agenda right here. Let me just pull up the agenda right quick. I believe the first matter of business is to approve the agenda. So we're gonna need somebody to make that motion, please.
I'll motion to approve the agenda.
I will second that.
Fantastic. We have a motion from Brandon and a second from Brady. And agenda is approved. Next is to approve the minutes from our last meeting on, was that March 30th?
So moved.
Seconded.
Fantastic. And we got a motion from Evelyn and second from Brandon. And so reports. I haven't personally received any reports. Do we have any reports from the advisors?
Yep, I mean, just two, I guess three, because there need new members. I did send a name to Brady. I had another name sent forward, but the person was no longer interested. It's flagged as urgent in your exec VP email, Brady. So if you have any other students who might be interested for spring quarter, please send them my way to join, or even if they just want to come and sit in and see how the meetings operate. So we have maybe some interest for next year, send them over. That was one. Item number two is just as a reminder, because you had all agreed on this, so I'm reminding you now, we are meeting quarterly. We're meeting weekly for the quarter with the intent that we're trying to keep our meetings to 1 hour. So making sure we're being succinct, but also taking the time to review the pieces that we have coming up. And then the last one, and this is more, not really communications received necessarily, but just a heads up to you all. We do have one kind of supplemental request that's going to come forward. So that'll likely be, if they're available, on our agenda for next week. Just so you, in terms of the planning, because I'm going to try and, we may not have as many of the program reviews on the agenda for next week, because I'm going to build in time for that supplemental request, and then we'll sub some program reviews. But I know we're going to talk about that process after we go through the ASCW one. So that is all I have for reports.
Awesome. Thank you, Joey. Do we have any reports from ASCWU?
Yes, sorry, I just can't find my unmute button. Okay, first of all, Joey, glad that you could always read my facial expressions. I don't have much to report, just want to reiterate, still looking for people to fill the slots. I just saw your email, Joey. And then we have a couple of events coming up throughout spring quarter. Got lots. We have Dare to Care today. We have the ESC Night Market later today. We have ASCW General Assembly next 2 Mondays from now, so April 17th. That'll be a meeting of the Student Senate, the ESC, the Board of Directors, and the Residence Hall Association in the ballroom, which will be really cool. Encourage y'all to attend that if possible. It'll be during our normal times, so 3 to 5, maybe pushing it to 5:30 on Mondays. So that's April 17th. Make sure to include you guys in the invitation. There's not a formal role for all of y'all, but I mean, y'all are S&A committee, so it's important to know what student government's doing, because for several different reasons. But with that, I just want to give you a heads up. I may or may not be here next week. I will be in New York all of next week. So if I feel up to joining a meeting at 8 o'clock after a long conference, I might join, but I probably won't be here next week. And then I'm also going to have to dip out today at 5:45 to take care of an apartment thing. But yeah, any questions regarding anything going on at ASCW? Sorry, I don't have much more of a report, but just kind of want to leave it open for you guys to ask me. Cool. With that, I'll yield my time. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you. That sounds awesome. I look forward to that. I have a friend that's a senator that was telling me great things. Now we have for public comment. Or sorry, no, next we go to communications received. Do we have any communications received? No, Joey's shaking his head. Awesome, no communications received. So next we'll open the floor up to public comment. Oh, and I see Miss Lola said in the chat that she's gonna try to get S&A committee openings posted in Weekly Hype. That sounds amazing. I just wanted to reiterate that for the recording in case it doesn't keep, I think it keeps the chat. Joey, you have your hand up?
I was just going to give a brief, again, an additional reminder to help spread the word. ACW elections filing is open right now. So anyone who is interested in running or anyone, please help spread the word. This is for our board of directors positions, our executive board. And so it'll be open for the next little bit, but they are live and open now. If they have questions, feel free to reach out to any of the current exec board, but definitely help spread the word so we get a good, strong candidate pool.
Awesome. Thank you, Joey. And Sean?
Yeah, I never usually announce anything ever. Based on my position, that's usually not related, but this might be the first time. So every year we have a CWU night with the Seattle Mariners. It's a game that, CW alums and faculty and staff and students are able to go to. So that's coming up on April 21st. So we, in the Northwest Center for Sport, partner with the alumni office, and we're doing that. The reason I'm announcing it here, if you want a ticket, they are almost sold out. So you would need to buy one as soon as possible if you want to get the giveaway, which is just like a Mariners jersey with CW colors. So just making sure I announce that.
That's awesome. Thank you. I see a lot of claps going around the room. I believe after that, we have new business to review program reviews for ASCWU through ASCWU. Would somebody like to pull the first one up?
Yeah, let me pull that up really quick and walk everyone through just, again, this is the first time we've gone through the program reviews. Hopefully you've taken a look at it. But let me share my screen and then I'll pull it specifically up on here. Uno momento. Okay, and there. So this is also, I'm walking through, so if anyone needs to find this from the piece, we go to the S&A website. Again, it's under funding reports. And then you scroll down to base funding program reviews. Again, you can look at the past ones. Those were presentations, so it's just the schedule. So you're looking at the current funding cycle. And then the drop down by all of them. And so we'll go to board of directors just as the first one to pull up here. And as you all look through it, each of these, they're different questions than what we had on the financial reports. They're asking a lot more about the programmatic pieces. How do they assess it? And so the intent for this first one for you all, and then after we look at ACW to talk about how do you all want to go about reviewing or looking at these this year, or in what capacity as we do them. And so I'll kind of just walk through the first one with you all and then kind of leave it open. So this is for the ASCWU Board of Directors, our executive board. And the first question, what ways does your program support CW students? I'm not going to read their answers within here, but I'm just going to slowly walk through those. So with that, in terms of how it supports CW students, I'm going to go to each one and then we can have the general question. It also asks, what are some of your specific program goals or learning or operational objectives? It's worded that way because, again, as we look at some of our base funded units, they may not have learning objectives because it's more an operational piece or things like that. And then how are you assessing the effectiveness of your program in achieving those targets? And again, as you can see, student government, their goal is again to represent all students, represent or lead some informal assessments. And this is partway through the year, keeping in mind. So there could be things they end up doing after this or that we recommend to them. What's the overall purpose of your program and what services does your program provide? Are there overlaps? Again, our board of directors represent different areas when you look at it. So it's each of those elected positions, the president, the vice president, director of student life and facilities, director of multicultural affairs, director of legislative affairs, and our Senate speaker. And so each of those have a little bit different, and we'll dive into those budgets here in a minute. But how's your program aligned with the purpose of S&A funding? And I will tell you all as we look at ACW, some of these are going to have similar answers because the answer is going to be similar across all of ASCWU. So no, you are not mistaken as you look and it looks the same. How does your program support CWU's mission and goals? And again, because we're still in the process and might be actually be finalizing now, but they were asked back in December and January based on the previous approved mission. So that's where they're answering. So keep that in mind. That's where this link, actually, I don't know if this link will take to the new one now. We're not going to test it now, but this was the previous one. And then some specific questions about the detailed information about who uses the program, some demographic information within it. Asking in the next one, how many unique students utilize the programs or services? And then how do you collect or gather these metrics? Are there any vacant positions in the program? At the time of this, all positions were filled. Given the budget reductions taking place, please tell us what specific impacts those reductions have had on the program compared to what was originally planned. So again, originally planned being when they requested the funding 2 years ago, what impacts or reductions are there? Are there any circumstances or challenges currently impacting your ability to use funding this year? And as you can see, there's some specific transitions in positions that change things that I think we're aware of. And then what growth or increases would you like to see in your program in the future? And so you'll see some of that. So with that open, do you all want me to jump to any specific questions? We don't need to go question by question necessarily, unless that's how you all want to do it. But are there specific things anyone wanted to either ask about or to highlight or to point out?
You know, I'm personally, I mean, I know they're still answering the old mission statement, but that's always interesting to see how people respond to that. But in general, I think the more interesting thing is just how I guess the health of this organization looks like. I mean, if they have all positions filled and they're doing things that are beneficial, that's that to CWU. I like that. Does anybody have any particular things they think we should look at?
I think it's good. I mean, I'll say this on this one because there's a caveat to it. Normally on this question where it says how many unique students utilize your program, I would get a little nitpicky because this is a very general answer, doesn't really answer. However, that's hard to assess because each of those programs you'll look at, like student life and facilities does programming. They do these under different facets, and so it's hard to say, but typically that would be something I'd point out being like, well, yes, you can say you provide this for all of the university or all students, but how many people are attending or using your program or service? That's not really how the board of directors works. So they couldn't really assess in that manner, which is why I'm using them as the example of that. I do think this is also always a fascinating one for you all to look at. Is the budget reductions taking place? What are some of the impacts on here? And they specifically touch on working for collaborations, looking at some of these pieces with the funds, considering the student voice. but also looking at the question 10 and 11, what impacts for this year. And again, they had specific about the transition of positions, but then what growth or increases. I think this is a nice way of positively looking ahead. It's always hard, right? Because for you all, it's like, yeah, that sounds amazing. And knowing that probably involves things like budget or funding that we may not be able to provide necessarily, but it gives an idea of what would be a priority or a focus. And so I know what's listed in here is just some of the initiatives and things they were looking at, also looking at some office space pieces, looking at a cohesive team, working together, doing some more large scale events, some uniforms. Some of these are things, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them, Brady, Kim. Some of these are things that they were able to put in place and accomplish. Some of them are loftier goals, like, again, moving to a space on the main floor of the Cirque is not a quick and easy, let's make that happen. I think things like uniforms and shirts for the officers, putting on events, those types of things are things that they were able to do. So with nothing else on this one, I'll go ahead and go to the next one, and I'm going to talk less on the others, but I'll go ahead, Brady.
Sorry, I think Joey might have touched on this, but one thing here with all the ASCW is that we're balancing the priorities of two different boards, like the first floor office space. That's not a priority of this board, but was a priority of last year's board. So it's kind of filling those also gaps is actually representing each board's priority because we ran on very different things than the previous board had. So our priorities changed. So I think that's just one. I don't know if Joey did cover this. Sorry if I'm just repeating you, Joey, but just keep in mind that especially with the ASCW ones and some other of the student ones, it's just that like as students change, especially with ASCW, our priorities change. And I think this year, then we already had very different issues, especially for ASCW than they were necessarily covering this time last year. So thank you.
No, you were good. I did not touch on that, Brady, but I think it's a great point to bring up within here, which is part of, again, when we're looking at the different years and the timing of when information is filled out or shared within it. The other one I'll let you all know is a good one to look at, especially if you see gaps in it, because we want to give feedback on this, is question 2, because this is something that will come up at the end of the funding cycle, asking about what, again, are the program goals and learning objectives and how are they assessing it? Because when funding is being requested for the new funding cycle, this was the intent, is we want people to tell us, how are you assessing, are you being effective? And then at the end, when you're coming in for your new funding cycle, want to ask for that data and information. You said this over the last 4 years, this is how you would measure if you're being successful. Show us what the data you said you were collecting shows. Was it successful? Were there gaps? If there were, how did you address those? So this is going to be a key one. As an administrator, it's what I would look at, but also I know this was one of the key questions that was developed from the committee when they were reviewing the last base funding request, was to ask this, because not everyone had an answer to that. And it didn't seem really fair, since no one had been asked that before, to hold them accountable. They were made aware, hey, you need to start assessing your programs and show that to us. So are we ready to move on to the next one? Seeing head nods.
Yeah, I think so.
So Club Senate, and again, we have it on there, that's what it was funded as. I know the name has shifted actually 2 other times. Interclub Association was even the name last year, and now it's Registered Student Organization. So you may see it as any of those within here, but. And I'll give a little bit of a brief moment for people. Again, if you want to pull up on your own to look at, but if there's any specific parts you want me to pull up or to talk about or address.
When I was looking through this one, it looks pretty well put together, especially in comparison to the first one. It even, like, for the breakdown of students affected, it even shows that the data, they say how the data is limited by their gathering methods. So it's I think it's just a really well put together report.
You know, that's great, Brett. This is a perfect example, but I was saying it's hard with that first one because they don't really have the same type of touch points to collect the data. This is a perfect example because again, they're funding these programs, this travel, the organizations. And so in my opinion, and I agree with you, Brandon, does a great job of showing the data and the breakdown across a number of metrics and touches on where there's limitations. And I will just highlight for this, again, this request came in, they filled this out in December, January, touched on one of the challenges being they had to be more selective with the requests. As you all remember, they're one of the groups who came in during winter quarter because they had already exhausted or really close to exhausting their budget. And we did provide supplemental funding for them to increase it. So. Anything else with Club Senate?
I was just gonna say, this is a cool idea here on number 11. I just look forward to seeing how that works out.
Are you talking about the RSO championship part there,
Yeah.
Alice?
Yeah, has that happened already, or is that gonna happen?
Yep, it happened, and I don't remember when in winter quarter because everything was a blur. But it did happen winter quarter. They had the series, I think. I don't remember the exact timing of it, but from everything I saw and heard from it, was really well attended. I don't know if any of you were able to participate.
Sean?
Yeah, so I can say that it did happen. Our student organization isn't strong enough this year to have participated, but it did happen and it sounded like it went really well. So
Awesome. Yeah, I'm interested in seeing more events like that for RSOs. I mean, it's all about that community. Sean, did you? Oh, your hand went down. Never mind.
Okay, I'll pull up the next one. So Equity Service Council.
This one here is also the same director, right?
Yeah, so all of the ASCW ones have the same program manager. It's the director of Slice who's listed on there. And so for all three of them, and you'll see Amber Hofer also shows up on the one for Slice. CLCE obviously is her area, campus activities. Unfortunately, Amber had a lot of these to fill out within that. But serves as one of the advisors to ASCW is why.
I like how for question 8, usually they say there's no vacant positions, but this report showed every single position specifically. I think that's a nice touch. So you can kind of see the full body of the organization.
Absolutely. So I don't think this goes. One thing, this kind of seems to cut off in the middle. If you look at question 7, never got really an answer on there. I will say, just so you're all's reference, this becomes an interesting one because ESC, Equity Services Council, is, again, as you can see on here, a group of organizations. Those organizations each individually put on programs that have participation. However, the funding for this goes towards the exec board to run those things, do larger stuff, and provide funding for specific programs or travel that come up. And so it's one of those, there is metrics within Presence for a lot of their programs and activities of the individual orgs within that. which is where you can see approximately 500 students through individual programs planned.
Since it was a bunch of separate organizations, it seems like they just wanted to have the approximation, and they said that it's collected through a comprehensive calendar that all orgs are responsible for maintaining with their attendance logs.
Oh, thank you. Yep, I see it cut off to here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I guess it's a little confusing about, I guess if they have the information, it would be nice for them to elaborate a little bit more, since they are also using presence for check-in and attendance. But since they're using two different formats, that might be hard to, you might get some double counting. You might get some that didn't check in, but the attendance log still tracked. So I guess the 500 is probably the best number to go off of.
I think that's something we can make a note on, Brandon, to ask the question, or at least to put out for next year's when they fill it out. And so I'm saying that so Jessica can make the note on there for me. But I mean, it is one, because I know within these areas, they will have the data, because again, as they mentioned, all of the events they use presence to check in, which is, if we go back to the RSO, that's where they pulled that data for the RSO, the Club Senate, was from presence. And so they should be able to pull comparable within the programs. The comprehensive calendar is more about the scheduling of the events where they take place, that part of it, but the more detailed demographics they all have in presence.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions, comments on ESC?
Not here.
Cool.
I like that answer to number 11. That's some cool stuff they're talking about there.
Pull back up. Oh yeah. Well, and I think, and this is where I'd have to look back, I think there's another student entity that's looking to be recognized this year as well.
Really?
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is one of the things that's always great and fascinating about our ESC orgs is, again, they can come forward, and there's a process they have to go through to get identified and become part of ESC. But it's great that we get more and more of these organizations as part of it. And so I've seen it grow and fluctuate and shift and change throughout the years. And so it's great to see more interest in this in the last couple of years with a couple new orgs joining. Unfortunately, you also get the flip side of sometimes orgs will leave. And that has happened as well, which is always disheartening, but sometimes it's also students have left and there's not as strong an interest or don't want to go through the process. So I'm going to pull up the ACW Legislative Affairs. Any specific parts you all would like to touch on or discuss or ask questions about?
No, not here. This is all really straightforward. I mean, I like how they're explaining like how their organization works with all these different groups. Like that's really nice to see.
I think the only part I'd put again as a comment similar to what we talked about in the last one is with question 7, knowing they reference that they determine this by gauging who showed up to our events and via presence for events that we need volunteers for, is just maybe asking for some of that more specific data on it. If it's available. If it's not, that's great. They can share that and say why they don't have that as consistently, but. And I didn't touch on this on the others, but again, you'll see this consistently, specifically amongst the ASCW when it talks about the budget reductions. A lot of what that has been some of the reductions in programming expenses to try and ensure that we're not having to eliminate or lessen the hours of our student employees. Because that's really all that most of these budgets are, besides programming, is going to be student employees. Which unfortunately means minimum wage goes up as our funding has had to go down. So it's a tough balance.
Yeah, I don't have any questions for this one.
Great. Jump to the next one. Student Academic Senate, which is again the name they were funded by, but this is the Student Senate.
Yeah, looking at this one, question number 7, it's they have their work. They got an uphill battle for them on this one. I look forward to seeing what system they develop, because boy howdy, that's gonna be rough.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point on there. I mean, asking the question of who utilizes their different functions. And so is it those informal pieces when they're tabling? Is it, and also saying, and I know this is referenced, I think in one of the earlier questions, the individual senators will also do programs and things each quarter. And so I think and those to my knowledge are not necessarily as formally connected using like presence for check-in and swiping of it. And so that becomes harder. Of the senators can come back and report, hey, I had 20 people attend the program, but it doesn't have that same demographic info. So yeah, definitely an uphill battle, Brandon. Other comments, questions, parts we want to highlight?
So the senator reduction was done in the previous academic year. Am I reading that right?
Yes. Yep.
I'm curious, like, I mean, I guess we won't know this till their next report. I'm just curious to see how that goes. I know the senators do a lot of good work there. Brady?
So this year we have been operating under a 15 senator model for the entire year. Having served as a senator last year, and I believe our 23 senators, to now previously chairing us in a 15 senators. Budget-wise, it's great. It's saving money. The Senate does not currently have a budget to support 23 paid positions, plus their uniforms, plus the space reservations, plus their name plaques. And that's not even, they still don't have any, each senator is required to throw at least one event each year as part of their job. And they have no programming budget whatsoever, so they have to depend on campus partners. Budget-wise, it's great. Student representation-wise, definitely has.
I don't know if this just froze on my URL.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Did you guys?
Sorry, I got booted out of the meeting. So I am back.
Okay. So yes, budget-wise, 15 senator reduction, great. Going down to the 15 senators, it has freed up a little bit of money, still not enough. But I'm not going to lie that it has hurt student representation. I mean, that's 7 positions that aren't there anymore. Because there are definitely students that are interested in certain roles. And so I know particularly when I was hiring the Senate, the MT Senate positions, there was definitely times, you know, I have a student that's in the, I have 2 students for the College of Business position, none for the College of Science position. I can't hire that other, I only have 1 position for those 2 students because they only qualified for 1. So, yeah, so does that kind of answer your question, Alice?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. It definitely sounds like you'll have a bit of an uphill battle there too, but best of luck with it.
Anything else with the academic senate, student senate? Great. And then the last one we have for tonight, and then we'll kind of touch about the process, but our student life and facilities. So our student life and facilities budget.
There's no current, oh. I see there's that they do say there's no current evaluation, formal evaluation. What was that, number 3?
Yep, scroll. Yep.
Does that mean they plan to maybe consider evaluation in the future? Where did I see? Oh, no, number 2, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Second paragraph, the effectiveness is evaluated. There's no current formal evaluation of programs and events within this office. I don't know, I'd be curious in seeing that if we ever could. If that wouldn't be too much work for getting that data.
Yeah. I think we put the question in on if there are any plans moving forward. I think there was a kind of similar, I didn't quite say the exact wording with most of our ASCW, is there's a lot based on the engagement or doing informal or receiving some of the feedback on that. This one's an interesting one, I'll say, because student life facilities, as you can read under the scope and purpose of it, goes from a broad spectrum. Some of it is doing programming and some of our pieces that we have come up. Some of it is doing and managing the Wellington mascot at different events, so not their events, but taking it there. And then there's a lot that has to do with providing representation and voice on a number of different governing boards of the institution, with our housing and dining, with our student union, with our CERC governance piece, the tech fee council. So it's kind of an interesting one in that there's a lot of representation committee part. And then there's the mascot part over here, and the facilities part. And then there's the large scale programming, like the wildfire things.
That definitely helps. Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah. So I think it would be interesting to see what that formal evaluation would look like. I mean, I think it's a great question. I think each one of those would probably have a different type of evaluation on how you would gather the success of it. I think similar to what we are just talking about and going to some of the other ones too with question 6 and question 7, talking about, again, the fact that it doesn't currently collect demographic data. I think some of that is with the uniqueness of how this budget operates, but also be interested to see, especially for the programming parts of it, are there ways to get more feedback or data? Any other questions, comments, things to highlight? Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen then so I can see you all. There we go. And that was our program reviews for this week.
That wasn't too bad. After that, we have old business for the base funding program reviews and discussion on that review process. What did we need to discuss around that, Joey? Was that the timing or just how many we're doing?
Kind of a multi, I mean, really what we had talked about last week was using these to give you all a sample of like, hey, here's what the program reviews are, knowing that all four of you are new to reviewing these and seeing them. I do also want to know, I know Brady had to leave, as he had referenced at the beginning of the meeting, had to pop off. And so really it's asking the three of you, do you want to continue looking at the rest of the program reviews in a similar model to what we just did? Would you prefer, now that you had a chance to look and see them, doing something different, whether that's you all reviewing and then us bringing up only specific ones that come up? I don't know. So that's where that's the discussion part, is how would you all like to do the review process this year? I know that it sounds like there's some discussion about kind of coinciding them for next year to have the financial annual reports and the program review for each unit done together. So that's why this year's kind of going to be however you all would like to do it. We don't have to worry about setting precedent, because it sounds like we're going to recommend they do something a little different next year. So thoughts?
I mean, we could probably go quicker with them if we reviewed on our own and came with questions, but I always find it interesting to see what other people find interesting. That gets my brain thinking differently. So doing it in a community setting like this helps in some ways too, I think. Brandon, Evelyn, y'all have any ideas?
I think that by reviewing them before we meet, it will allow the process to go much faster, which would allow us to get more things done. So I'm personally a fan of us looking at them, and then we can still go down the list, but instead of like holding on for 2 minutes to see if anyone has anything that they saw, we can kind of just go straight off the bat. Here's what I saw, here's some things that, and then that still gives us the community feeling of like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Okay, well then how does that apply to this? And then it would still build on itself, but the process overall would go faster.
I agree with that. I think it would be nice to be able to look it over on your own first and then come back with questions and hear different perspectives, not necessarily reading the whole thing together. It's a little hard to see too because it's small. So, just being a little more prepared for the next one, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think we can do that. I mean, what I would do, just so you all know, is I'd still have us on the agenda list. Here's the ones we're going to look at, because sometimes it is public, but also the groups, which I would always encourage, like, hey, if you know your program's being discussed, maybe be there in the background just to hear what they're saying, what questions come up. Not that you're necessarily going to answer right there, but it gives them the opportunity at least. And so I think that's good. We can go through and I'll put, based on what other things we have on the agenda, trying to keep it within an hour. I think we did a good job there. We had 7 of them and still made it through in our hour time, even with our lasting things. And so I think if we keep roughly on no more than 8 for an hour meeting, but if we have other things, I might shorten it up where they come in, but we'll put ahead of time. And so just ask that you all take a chance to look. And so the next ones, and we will go alphabetically similar. So just to keep we don't miss anything, but we'll do kind of campus activities. We'll start in the Cs, campus community garden, career services, that kind of stuff with availability. Just make sure you look over it ahead of time, because I do think that does help. If you've looked, you make your notes like, hey, this stood out to me. Great, we can talk about that, and then pull it up if needed to highlight something. Otherwise, it's like, nope, everyone thought that looked great. Cool, we'll move on to the next one. Perfect. Sounds
Yeah.
like a plan to me.
As Joey was saying, sounds like a plan. I think at that point, it just leaves us with public comment, second call. So, Joey?
I was going to say something, I'll still say it, but then Lola put something that I'll share in a moment. The public comment I was going to say, and then I'll read Lola's, because she shared she's not able to join except via chat. I'm just going to let you all know if there's availability or not. I mean, we have a ton of things coming up, but I know right now, about to happen this evening in the Cirque, is going to be the ESC night market ongoing. And so just sharing about that current activity. And again, putting out the word again, if there are any students who are interested in joining the S&A committee, please send names to me, as well as encourage people to run for the elected offices. But I'm going to read Lola's, I'm going to quickly, some upcoming events that Lola wanted to share with us from publicity. BSU Showtime at Central is coming up on April 23rd. RSO Royale, a scavenger hunt for clubs, is coming up. I don't know when. Poly Central rejoining ESC and hosting Polyfest in May, which is amazing for those who haven't potentially seen our Polyfest programs in the past. Coming up, ASCW elections, the actual voting is going to be on May 1st through the 5th. You will get more reminders from me as that comes up. Wildcat Pantry celebration on May 10th. Source is happening May 17th and 18th. And ASCW is partnering with Second Harvest to bring a free mobile food pantry. We had this last quarter for those who may have seen it and around. They're bringing them back again on May 17th. We have student appreciation events coming up in May, including Sweezy Day, which is a historical event from way back with Central, actually stopped in the 70s, and looking at bringing some version of it back. That'll be on May 19th, led by the Student Senate. Student Appreciation Day Carnival theme, led by Campus Activities and Slice on May 25th. And then a Wild Fest concert with some exciting performers coming up on June 1st. And then so many more, but we want to make sure we got this on our radar and hope we'll share out within our networks. Thank you, Lola.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I was hearing about that scavenger hunt from one of the senators, and that sounds so much fun. Do we have any other public comment? I see Joey shaking his head, so I think that just leaves us to adjourn the meeting. So I'll call the meeting to adjourn at, what is it, 5:50? And everyone has a great night.
Have a great week, everyone. See you next Thursday.
Thank you.